The events of our film today begin with Hercules, starting from his birth. We learn that his father was a king named Zeus, and his mother's name was Alcmene. From the moment of his birth, we see that he is incredibly strong and extraordinary. One day, as Hercules grows a little older, he is attacked by serpents. But miraculously, the child is able to defeat them. His mother is astonished by his abilities. As he grows up, people recognize his strength and extraordinary powers. He is tasked with completing 12 dangerous labors, and if he succeeds and survives them, they agree to let him live in peace. Hercules travels to a lake and encounters a group of monstrous serpents, but he is able to kill them with his weapon. He also fights and easily defeats wild boars. Most importantly, we see that he battles 3 lions despite their tough skin that is almost impenetrable. Hercules strikes the lions with arrows, holds their mouths, and breaks them. Afterward, we meet a man named Iolaus, one of Hercules' comrades. He speaks to a group of people about Hercules' deeds, but they remain skeptical and unwilling to believe him. Taius responds to their doubts and knows that Hercules will come and save him. While they are hanging him by a rope, Taius enters, and Hercules joyfully greets him. He tells them that despite the strength of the lion, Hercules was able to kill it without a sword. At the same time, Hera enters wearing the skin of a lion, and people realize that Hercules accomplished all of this with his own hands and strength. The people see that they are more numerous than Hercules, but he is still able to overpower them. Hercules knows that the landowner offered him gold in return for either freeing them or killing them. 5 of them confront him, and he fights them off easily with his divine weapon. During the battle, we see Hercules talking to a man named Autolycus, and they know that they want to convince them more, so Autolycus comes out and fights with them. While he is fighting them, he calls for Hercules to help. Then a woman named Atalanta comes down and joins them in the fight with her arrows. They also have a man named Ambrosius who kills anyone he encounters. They call on another man named Taius, and he actually joins them in the fight. After Hercules finishes the battle, he goes to rescue Theus from the group's leader. Theus orders Hercules to lead the rest of the people, except the leader, to safety. Then they return to their place, and Autolycus counts the gold and they talk to each other. They discover that Ambrosius is a sorcerer who predicts what will happen. It turns out that the lion and the crow have made an agreement, and there will be a conflict in a sea of corpses. Autolycus is not convinced by his words, and they laugh at him and are very happy that they won the battle and have the gold with them. Hercules agrees with Autolycus to fight a lot in exchange for the gold so that they can live. While they are talking, a woman named Argene enters. She is the daughter of King Katniss and asks Hercules to bring their land back from the warlords, led by Rhesus, because they are being destroyed every day and their crops are ruined, and they also kill innocent people. Hercules hesitates, and she tries to convince him, but Autolycus knows that he doesn't have much time. She thinks that he fights only for glory and fame, and realizes that her father is very rich and will pay him whatever he wants. So they confirm it from Ambus's words, and they know that the lion and the crow really make peace. Hercules and his men rise and go on their journey with Argene to the city of Troas in eastern Greece. They arrive and meet a man named Eteocles, and Argene knows that he was very worried about her, so she welcomes them and asks Argene to go and inform her father of their presence. There is a statue there, and Zeus is very impressed by its appearance. So Argene tells that the statue was built in 5 years and 1,000 men participated in its construction. At that time, Argene's son Arios would come out and run towards them. He would meet Hercules and tell him that he is a great admirer of his personality and knows all the tasks he has accomplished. Arjun would take Arios inside the house, feeling afraid of Hercules, but the boy would see that Hercules would never harm him and would go out to greet him. They would know that the king is now coming to meet him. We see that 3 years ago, Hercules remembers being in the palace of King Eurysiphe in Athens, where his wife and children were waiting for him. They would greet him, and everyone would bow and welcome him. The king would talk to Hercules and ask if he saved them from the monster named Hydra. Hercules would cut off the heads of Hydra and find out that they regrow, so he realizes that they need to be cauterized. He would also thank him for providing them with a great service and ask the people to cheer for Hercules. And then we return to the present, where Hercules enters to meet Katniss, who is very happy because he sees a legend like Hercules and takes advantage of the fact that Hercules fights alone against all armies. Hercules introduces himself to his men, and they also know that he is not alone. King Katniss is very impressed with Autolycus and also knows that he heard that he is a sorcerer and can predict the future. He asks the king to reveal the future to him, and then Ambrosius intervenes, and they know that he is not hiding anything. The king also sees that Atlanta cannot be present in this war, and we find that Atlanta comes out with an arrow and threatens him and his men. But she misses, and the king apologizes to her and takes back his words. While they are eating, they find out that Rhesus is a powerful sorcerer, and with his magical words, he confuses the men and makes them submit to him. He also becomes the leader of an army of monsters, and half of them are horses. They take Katniss and show him the misery they have reached because of Rhesus. And we see that everyone is immersed in their own blood, and some of them are burned and crippled by Rhesus's men. Katniss becomes afraid, believing that Hercules cannot handle Rhesus's army, so he responds to him. Hercules knows that he has come to fight them for the sake of gold, but he is still not convinced that they can defeat Rhesus's army. He asks Arjun to bring them safety. She descends precisely, and at this point, Hercules is convinced by her words. He goes to inform his men that they will be killed for their sake. However, his men believe he is mistaken in his opinion. Nonetheless, Hercules is pleased and informs them that he has agreed with them on the weakness they requested, but they still believe they cannot handle this entire army alone. They suggest training King Katniss' army and joining forces with them for the war. Hercules goes and starts speaking to them, training them, and even getting Dewey's involved with them. However, they all fall like corpses, and Hercules realizes that they are extremely weak. He asks them to stand with him so they can save them from Rhesus's army. The explorer states that there are 4,000 soldiers whose minds are enchanted like demons. Hercules himself is not convinced by his words and goes to Vince to clarify their location on the map. They also discover that they will be present in BC within 6 days. Hercules becomes furious, realizing that King Katniss' men are not ready for battle yet. He sees the meeting with Rhesus as a great risk. King Katniss is determined to follow Vince's advice, knowing that if Rhesus is present, the entire country will be engulfed in flames and everyone will die. He orders his men to prepare for the battle and also asks Hercules to stand with them. However, Hercules wants King Katniss' army to fight alongside them. Then Arios goes to them, pretending to be captured and tied up. He frightens the guard and manages to escape, returning to his mother. Arios also admires Hercules and wishes to become as great as him when he grows up. Hercules visits Arjunai, who has rebelled against the people who were wounded in the war. He presents her with his lion's head necklace as a gift. The next day, he prepares the king's army for the battle, and they set off. Meanwhile, Eos hides among the army, eager to fight alongside them, because he believes Hercules' army is weak and needs their help. As they reach Rhesus's army, they encounter a dense fog, and suddenly Hercules and the king see Rhesus's army has annihilated the people. Hercules decides to continue the journey on foot, and they witness crows and a lion feasting on the corpses. At a specific location, Hercules stops and finds Coots lying on the ground, surrounded by decayed bodies. He lifts Coots to his feet and binds his wounds, realizing that Rhesus and his army have deceived them. They start fighting each other, killing one another. During the battle, Hercules asks his army to guard the king, and he rides his chariot, shooting arrows alongside Atlanta. At the same time, a soldier from the army tries to kill the king, but Hercules swiftly eliminates him and anyone who stands in his way. He rides the chariot with Amphis and uses swords to fight. Then the king emerges and asks about Rhesus, feeling saddened that they came to save the country, but it turned out the opposite, resulting in the death of half his army. Hercules, however, realizes that everything happening to them is not solely because of Rhesus, but also because he didn't train the army for wars or combat. Hercules asks him to train the army well for combat. After that, he goes to Hercules and tries to kill him. Atalix intervenes and tells him that what they lost in the war is enough. He gets up and thanks the explorer. But Atalix threatens him that if he makes another mistake, he will kill him with his own hands. Then Argene comes and treats Hercules, asking her to tell him about Arios. She also learns that he is a very obedient child and hopes that one day he will become king. Frustrated, Hercules talks to her and lets her leave. While he is sleeping, unfortunately, he remembers his children and wife being slaughtered. He also thinks about his guilt and how he deserves to be punished for killing them. He was supposed to be eradicated, but his punishment is to live and suffer from their loss. As he screams, Duis comes and reassures him. The next day, Empress comes and talks to him about the lions and tells him that what he saw will happen to him because no one can change his destiny. Then Argene goes and sits with Hercules' men, trying to manipulate them into talking about Hercules' topic of killing his wife and children. But they know that no one knows the truth, because they actually found Hercules alone with his dead wife and children. They start telling her how Hercules brought happiness to their lives. Here, Argene understands that they are loyal and true friends, and she escapes from them so she won't know the truth, of course. Then he goes to gather the king's army and convinces them of the wars and combat. In the end, Couts comes and tries to stop them, suspecting that Amphis is deceiving him. But Hercules sees through the deception and fights Duis with his sword. Nothing happens to Amphis. We also know that his shield is made of boar skin and is made of an indestructible material. So, they fight and form a fighting group in all its forms. And he can also teach the army how to defend themselves. Here, Hercules enters with the king and Autlikos, and they also write down Rhesus' location. They kill the explorer and tell him to go to Rhesus and bring them his map. Rhesus goes and informs Amphis that Rhesus has set up a camp on Mount Styx. As soon as his men are ready, they will move and immediately ask Amphis if they will win the war or lose. Amphis predicts that they will be in hell, and they will die within a week in a place like hell. Then Autlikos stops the army and makes them stand firm. They know that their efforts were not in vain, and indeed, they all move towards Rhesus's location and see that they are standing on a very high mountain. They hear one of them playing a flute, and then they go to Hercules and his army. Rhesus reveals his mask and declares that he is ready to fight them. He also threatens Hercules that his power will end on his land. In response, the soldiers become agitated. When they encounter Rhesus' army, they realize that they are facing a formidable force. After threats to the king and Hercules from Rhesus, Hercules becomes angry, and they realize that they are about to take the legend from them. Hercules is also prepared to die at any time. so Rhesus orders his army to engage in war and kill them. At that moment, Atalanta enters, riding a chariot with Outlikos, and she shoots arrows at them. Hercules also starts attacking them with his weapon. At the same time, the army engages in battle with Rhesus' army. Then, Outlikos draws his sword and strikes the army, and they find that Rhesus' army is retreating. Rhesus becomes furious, puts on his mask, and rides his horse towards Hercules, drawing his sword as well. He tries to strike Hercules' head, but Hercules lifts the horse and throws it to the ground. At that moment, the army rejoices and focuses on the name of King Couts. And we see that they were also able to capture them with chains, and the army demolishes Rhesus's army with bricks. Suddenly, Calus stops and hits Vence in front of the entire army, mocking him. He goes down on his knees to lift Vence from the ground and prevents Calus from hitting him. Vence realizes that Hercules has taken them away from their land and separated them from their loved ones. But Hercules sees that he has not done anything except stopping them from burning the sphere, so he smiles at him. They realize that Hercules is not burning the sphere, and they take advantage of his words. They know that Couts is not well liked, and that's why they hired him to accomplish their tasks. Vence speaks to Hercules and lets him know that he is fighting against the wrong army. Then Couts and the army go to celebrate, and Ergine comes and brings water to the prisoners. However, her father refuses and asks Sticklus to speak. From him, we learn that Rhesus has become united, wearing the crown, and we find Rhesus clinging to his words. Someone comes and hits him, and the entire army laughs at him at the same time. At that moment, Outlikos sees that they must leave because their mission is done, and he wants to take the gold and leave. Ergine says goodbye, and Hercules follows her, asking God why he sees pity in Rhesus' eyes. He also suspects that her father is the reason for the war and the destruction that is happening, and he feels annoyed when he learns that she benefited from it because of her father. She smiles and lets him know that she is not doing anything for him, but rather out of fear for her son from her father, as her father threatened her that he would harm her if she didn't do what he wanted. She also knows that her husband was a king, and her father poisoned him to take his place. Rhesus becomes a mature man from the Civil War and sees that his son is the legitimate king when his father dies. She still hopes that her son will oppose him well. So Hercules realizes that this is a dream and that this conversation will not happen, so he leaves her to take her son with her as he walks away. And then Calus arrives. They know that the king wants them, and while he is leaving, Hercules meets Atticus, who informs him that they are protesting against not receiving their wages. Hercules goes straight to the king and confronts him because he believes that the king betrayed him. However, the king's response makes him see that he is nothing more than a gang leader who sells his conscience for gold. The king rises and realizes that he is a legend, and he had dreamed of becoming a king in the country, and now it has happened. He wants to establish an empire. They also know that the training he provided to the army is the reason for what happened to them, and he asks Hercules to stay with him and continue training in the army. Hercules hesitates but then tells him, "You, the killer of your own children." Hercules tries to hit him, but Outlikos stops him, and the king sees that he no longer needs him and walks away at the same time. He asks his men to bring him the gold, and while they prepare themselves, Hercules throws his share of the gold to Outlikos, knowing that he will not take anything stained with innocent blood. He also sees that he cannot leave until he fixes what he has done wrong, so he insists that Outlikos pay his men their wages for this suicide mission because the country needs them. But Outlikos sees that they are heading to hell as long as they have the gold, and also refuses to stay with him in this battle. However, the rest of the group tries to convince Outlikos to stay with them, and they know that he sacrificed a lot for them and is now leaving them. They also see that they owe him a lot in many ways, so they give their speech and let him know that they are one family. They also assure him that if they die, they will die for him too, because he defends them and is willing to die for them at any time. At that moment, the whole group throws their gold to Outlikos and chooses to stay with Hercules. Outlikos chooses to leave and take the gold. Hercules also asks Zeus to go with him, but Zeus refuses and chooses to stay with them. Then Outlikos walks away and asks Atlanta what they should do with the captured King Pharos. They realize that he paid them for the sake of Greece, and they won't let him down. They enter the city, and Atlanta shoots arrows at the guards while the army surrenders their weapons. Pharos threatens to kill Zeus if Hercules doesn't throw his weapon, and they all comply. The king arrives and realizes that Hercules refused to join them, but he allows him to leave. Meanwhile, Argenie and her son approach Hercules, with Argenie holding him captive. Hercules takes the boy from her, and she strikes him, but the boy runs to Hercules, and they embrace. At the same time, they capture Argenie, and then the king grabs the boy by his hair, screaming for Hercules to save him. Calus strikes Hercules, causing him to fall to the ground. Calus takes the boy and retreats, leaving Hercules stunned. Then Hercules sees 3 tigers attacking again, surprising him as he finds Eury's entering with King Coates and realizes they are the ones who won. Now, Coates will protect Greece alongside Hercules, and they punish Eury's for his betrayal. Hercules also remembers that the wolves were with him the night his wife and children died, and he understands that Eurus drugged him and let the wolves devour his family. Hercules takes revenge on Eurus, realizing how much he tortured them, and the fangs of the wolves are embedded in his daughter. Atlanta and the remaining men are imprisoned and shocked by what they hear. They also realize that the people were cheering for Hercules, not the king, which infuriates Hercules. He confronts Coates, making it clear that he doesn't want to hear anything else. King Coates brings his daughter, who loves Hercules, and asks Hercules to marry her. Hercules is taken aback and realizes how Coates manipulated him. However, Coates sees Hercules as a worthy heir and asks Argenie to stay away from her son, screaming and crying. 11-11, and Coates orders the slaughter of his daughter while she screams. She asks him to stay away from her son at the same time. Hercules tries to free himself, and Ambrios encourages him. Meanwhile, the guard unsheathes his sword and aims it at Argenie's neck. Hercules manages to free himself and saves her. He fights alongside the wolves and sustains injuries. Argenie leads the rest of the group out of the prisons. Hercules manages to break the wolves' jaws and kills Coates. He locks the door behind him, but they manage to follow and join him. They continue to defeat the entire army, and Hercules confronts Eurus and throws fireballs at him. Eurus, driven by greed, leaves Hercules to live in exchange for all the gold he possesses. However, Hercules dodges the fireballs and becomes enraged. He draws his sword and kills Eurus. He also asks for forgiveness from his wife and children. At the same time, Calus appears and tries to strangle Hercules with a strong rope, but Eurus kills Calus from behind. They then search for Arios, and it is revealed that Coates has prepared an army to fight alongside them. Hercules tries to convince them to stand with him, but Coates attempts to kill him. Then Eurus intervenes, and they put the knife to Arios' neck. Argenie prevents him from killing her son and screams and cries again. The king decides to withdraw from the battle or kill the child, and he starts counting from 1 to 3 before killing the child. Suddenly, Outlikos shoots an arrow and saves the child. While the child runs, the king's guards try to catch him, but Ys steps in and takes the arrows in his body. He screams, breaks the arrows and runs towards them, killing them all with his dagger. Hercules runs to join him in the fight, but unfortunately, he gets shot in the leg with an arrow. They reconcile as Ys has taken many arrows himself. Meanwhile, the king launches an attack on them. But then we see Hercules' men setting fire to them, and Hercules goes to pick up the debris and throws it far away. His men also set fire to the army, causing chaos. We then return to Hercules with the debris, and for the first time, he says his name and dies. Hercules mourns for him, then gets up as the king approaches with his army. Hercules grabs the statue from its place and throws it at them, killing them all. Afterwards, the remaining army surrenders, and they focus on Hercules' name. And with that, our film ends today. I hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to support us by liking and subscribing to our channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell to receive updates on new content. See you soon. We hope for you a sweet dream.